To start with, it is important for us to understand just how big of a role medtech plays in the healthcare ecosystem. MedTech products range from simple tools like band-aids to sophisticated machines like MRI scanners, smart implants, AI-powered diagnostic, orthopedic devices like knees and hips. They all play a crucial part in ensuring the health and well-being of millions of patients across the globe. Now, as you can imagine, with such a wide variety of devices comes a whole host of patient safety and quality challenges. We are talking about issues like properly diagnosing or treating medical conditions, avoiding unnecessary complications or side effects, and of course, ensuring that these devices can be used safely in the hands of both medical professionals and patients themselves. Now, in recent years, technology has had a huge impact on this industry, with AI, machine learning, Gen AI taking the center stage. These cutting-edge technologies are playing a huge role in the way we develop, test, monitor medical devices. In this fast-paced world of medtech, ensuring patient safety and quality is like the golden rule. As we dive deeper into the world of medtech, it is crucial that we strike a balance between pushing the boundaries of what's possible and safeguarding patient safety and privacy. Overall, it's all about balancing innovation with safety and quality. To help us unpack all this, I'm joined by a very seasoned medtech leader. Please join me in welcoming Steve. Steve is the Chief Patient Safety and Quality Officer at Philips. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. And experience is translated. I'm old and getting older every day. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Steve, as we start, if you can, for our audience, if you can share your journey in the medtech and more in the quality with patient safety and quality, that will be great.
Sure. So as you said, I'm the Chief Patient Safety and Quality Officer at Philips. So I have full responsibility for the global aspects of quality, regulatory, our clinical medical office, and also a transformational program office. And so womb to tomb, all aspects, front end product development across all of our BUs and all of our different technologies, MR, CT, et cetera. Obviously, a big hand in our supply chain manufacturing. We have manufacturing plants all around the world. And then especially on this topic, but especially in what I do, is interacting with our commercial and sales groups and customer service, sales, and support. And so being here just a little over a year. Prior to that, I was at Cardinal Health for several years as the EVP of quality and regulatory, supporting the global enterprise, which had our pharmaceutical, our distribution, and our medical, about $180 billion in revenue. And again, covered all aspects of quality and regulatory there. And then prior to that, I was at Zimmer Biomet I was the VP of Quality and Regulatory Compliance and Regulatory Affairs for what we call orthopedics and Americas. So Canada down to Argentina and things. And so was there and covered all aspects of quality and regulatory affairs and regulatory compliance. And then prior to that, I was in Danaher, responsible for the quality, regulatory, and the clinical group for the diagnostics division. So there was 4 companies covering diagnostics, so IVD. And then prior to that, I was at Boston Scientific for almost 10 years and had quality and regulatory compliance. When I left there, it was for what we call CRV, which was the combination of our cardiovascular, our CRM, and then electrophysiology, neuromodulation, and imaging groups. So I've always been, in quality. I joke that I can't escape no matter how hard I try. And I really love quality and regulatory. And the reason I love it, and you and I've talked before, it's one of the few functions, if any function, that could call itself a hub. And what I mean by that, it's at the center of everything. As I said earlier, I'm at Philips. My team is responsible, along with our R&D BU partners, at front-end product development. So whether that's our quality design assurance group doing the risk management, doing a lot of the V&V activities, the regulatory affairs on submissions and registrations, et cetera, around the globe. So you're highly engaged with manufacturing and distribution and warehousing. And then again, you're working, hand in glove with our sales and service teams, supporting the customers directly. And so it's that one group that you don't get the chance to, quote, step away and step out. Everything around the business you have to be engaged with. And I love that because you can really, 1, make a difference, but 2, you see how everything is connected and you have a difference to make at every aspect. And so again, I've always enjoyed it. I've been fortunate to be in these roles. I've been fortunate, if either because I'm good or slow, I think it's more likely slow, that I get engaged in a lot of transformational activities, regulatory compliance issues, et cetera, multiple warning letters, et cetera. And Philips is definitely no different of a challenge. And so I enjoy that also, because you can be at the front end of a transformational change. And that really means that you have the ability to instill new culture, new processes, new systems, new behaviors, new talent to turn a company around to, quote, do the right thing. And so I've been fortunate in my career to be at the lead of a lot of different transformational activities. And Philips, again, is one of the bigger challenges in front of me, but it's an exciting challenge nonetheless.
So, Steve, I mean, this is such a good overview. And I wanted to start with unpacking a recent quote that I saw from you. You said, and very similar to the comment that you just made, is every activity, every process, every tool, every system ultimately and directly linked to the mission, which is patient safety and quality. So given your current role, you touched on those things at Philips as well, that how is your experience, your passion, your commitment driving change at Philips?
And that's really going back to the basics. I mean, again, a lot of companies, when they get themselves into issues and have to, they have warning letters, they have consent decrees, they have these challenges, it's because they forget the basics. They forget what the basics is. And the basics really is everything we do, everything that we think about should go back and start and end with the patient safety, the product quality, and the data integrity. And so if you're doing something that doesn't directly link or support or bring value to that, then you're doing the wrong thing. And so again, it's really just reinforcing, do the basics, make them fundamental, that you don't have to think about it, but you're always thinking about it, that you're always focused on those activities. And so as soon as you start thinking about other things, you start thinking about, cost, you start thinking about things. Doesn't mean those things aren't important, but if you're only thinking about cost, if you're only thinking about efficiency, if you're only thinking about efficiency and how to get things, quote, faster, without making things better for the patient, better for the product quality, or better for the data integrity, you could save all the money in the world and you won't, because it's going to cost you in the end. And so get back to the basics, do the fundamentals, and then the rest will build onto itself. The rest will deliver itself. But that's what I mean by that quote, is just everything should have a reason for, a benefit to, and a value from the patient, the customer, and the consumer.
Steve, I think that's a great point. And in part of going back to the basics, we're looking for how do we build and sustain culture of quality. Oftentimes we have seen that is a more episodic. So something happened, everyone is transforming. After that, everyone goes back to the business as usual. So I want to get your thoughts on how companies should build sustaining culture of quality. Quality is everyone's responsibility, not just the folks in quality. So if you can talk about how you are transforming and how you are building a sustaining culture of quality that have from all the employees across the different functions.
Well, I think there's a couple things you do. Patient safety and quality is dynamic. We have the tendency to think compliance is a static thing. It's either good or bad. Compliance is an evolving, moving element. And so if you don't think it in that nature, you're always going to, quote, be behind. And so what you have to do is make sure that patient safety and quality is dynamic. And so what are you doing to constantly improve? What are you constantly to get out in front? And that's because of new expectations, technology changes. There's so many things that are evolving in a dynamic world that if you operate statically, you're never going to be where you need to be. So I think the first thing you want to do is make sure that it is dynamic. Two, you want to make sure that patient safety and quality is not just an end result, but it's a strategy. And what I mean by strategy is that you constantly have to make sure that how are you evolving it? How are you improving it? How are you making it resonate more? And that really gets back into making sure not only are you meeting the requirements, but exceeding the requirements in that dynamic world, but two, you make sure that it's sustainable. You hear about companies that get into warning letters or get into compliance issues, and then they go out and they really focus and they do remediation, they bring in consultants, they do all this work, they quote fix it and then forget it. And what happens is when you fix it and forget it, it comes back on you. And so you always constantly have to quote fix, prevent, fix, prevent. And that's really what you want to try to do, is make sure that you're constantly improving yourself. But by preventing via sustainability, you don't have to then worry about it coming back on you. You don't forget about it because it's always front and center. Back to the first quote, you make sure that it's your starting point, your ending point of every day. The last thing you do to really make it matter, make it resonate, make it sustain, make it personal. And what I mean by that is I joke, but it's very true. I may have the title Chief Patient Safety and Quality Officer, but at Philips, the culture that we're driving is that we want 70,000 plus Chief Patient Safety and Quality Officers. And what you mean by that is you make sure that what each person is doing at Philips, that they take a personal responsibility and a shared accountability for ensuring patient safety and quality. I mean, an example we did last October, we did what we call patient safety and quality timeout. And so basically for all 70,000 people, regardless of level, regardless of function, regardless of geography, we said one day in October, stop. And what we mean was stop, take a pause, take a timeout to reflect on what you do in your daily work that has a direct linkage to the patient safety, product quality, data integrity. And the great story I give is we had this, and it was very exciting because people just never get the time or make the time. And so we gave them the time, we gave them permission, trust, coverage, confidence to do it. And people did, but there was a team, and it was funny because I was talking to them about a week or so after the patient safety timeout, and it was our HR team, specifically our onboarding team, teams that bring on, we have new employees, they help in the onboarding, the transition. And they were telling me that they struggled at the beginning of that day to determine what they do that impacts patient safety and quality. And they talked about how we're not product builders, so we don't touch the product, or we're not our field service engineers that are servicing and maintaining the equipment. So we don't, and they were like really struggling. And then they did a timeout in the timeout. They said, hold on. What is it that we do? Well, they talked about, we onboard, we make sure people's transition, we make sure that people, when they come and join us at Philips, that the experience is positive, that they get all of the administrative but other things done. And they said, okay, what happens if that doesn't go well? And they said, what do you mean? Well, what happens if a person, a field service engineer, what if when he comes on board or she comes on board, that onboarding process wasn't to their expectations, or it wasn't positive, it left a bad taste in their mouth? Now they're focused on their onboarding as opposed to what they do that directly does impact patient safety.
Yeah.
And so they went, yeah, how do we do that? And so they started really changing their perception, that they said, hold on, I may not quote directly link to the end customer, but I do directly link to the internal customer, who then directly links. And then all of a sudden their conversation, their dialogue changed tremendously. And they started figuring out, what are the things that we do? What can we do better? And it wasn't because they stopped themselves or limited themselves. They said, no, we're not limited. So let's figure out what we can do. That's the example where everybody has a direct linkage. Whether you see it or not, whether you feel it or not, you do. And so how do you then take that personal responsibility and that accountability that says, okay, today I'm going to be the Chief Patient Safety and Quality Officer for my job, and I'm going to make sure that I always have that patient in mind.
Steve, I think that's a great point. Couple of things that I heard from you. One is fix it, prevent it, make it personal. And I also like the idea of that everyone in the company could be Chief Patient Safety and Quality Officer. It doesn't have to be one person. It's a role that everyone has to think of and play. So talking about the patients a little bit more on this, we see that there's a role for patients themselves. And in new technologies, the way we are pushing those direct-to-consumer products that customers, patients directly, they're using the product themselves. So if you can talk a little bit more about the role of educating patients, so they can also take care of, be aware of the devices and how to use the devices and what these risk factors for the devices, so they can make a better decision themselves.
And I think it's education, a two-way street in this case. So first, it's an education to the patient, to the consumer, to the customer. What's the product? What's its intended uses? How it can be used? How it can be misused? And making sure that education is, one, readily accessible, that the people have access to it, that they can know where to get it. Two, that it's understandable. Again, you don't want it at such a high level or clinical, et cetera, that the patient may not fully understand or grasp. And so you want to put it in the context that a patient will not only have access to it, but understand it. And then what you also want to do is give the patient access to ask questions, through multimedia, through direct, customer service, whatever. Because again, you want to make sure that people have a mechanism to reach out, and then they know when they reach out that they're going to get information, et cetera. So that's the first way to do it, making sure that you're educating, the users, the patients, et cetera. I also believe that it needs to be reversed. We need to get educated by and from the user. We have the tendency to believe we know what the user is doing. We know what the patient is going through. We almost take it for granted. And in reality, we probably know very little of what a patient is going through, or what a patient is looking for, et cetera, or how a patient can use it, especially as you get into non-clinical use, more consumer products like you highlighted. That even becomes more prevalent, that you have to understand how it can be used or misused. And so the education has to be a two-way street. We're educating the users, the patient, the consumer, but two, we have to get educated from them in terms of how they use it, what they want to use, what are their expectations, how could they properly or improperly utilize the devices? How do we make sure that we understand how they properly or improperly utilize it? What controls we put in place? And so it's really that two-way education process that you have to have. It's not just a single one way, here's how it's used. It's how's it used, and then how do you want it used?
Steve, coming back to your point, how do we learn from the patients or the users? And in that context, looking at post-market surveillance and complaint handling, we think that that's the best source of being educated by or from the experiences that patients or the healthcare providers are having. So I want to kind of touch that topic as well, that how do you see that space is transforming, how you are transforming at Philips in terms of post-market surveillance and complaint handling. And then oftentimes we have seen that companies use this as a compliance, that I just need to submit a report, less about it, as you said, the feedback about the product itself, that how do I learn from that? So if you can talk a little bit more about that as well.
Absolutely. And you said it well. It is the richest gold mine of data any company has. And very few companies really utilize it to its fullest extent. And so every complaint is absolutely a gift in terms of feedback, in terms of what's working, what's not working, potential issues, potential solutions. And so what you really have to do is transform from a, quote, compliance only mentality to a rich gold mine of data to enhance and improve the customer experience. And so you have to change it. Most companies, especially companies that get themselves into compliance issues, tend to think just strictly processing. I have to process a complaint. I have to go from point A to point B. I have to do reportability. I have to check the box. I have to do things, et cetera. And all those are true. All those are requirements, but you're not utilizing to its fullest extent. It has to be a true end-to-end closed loop system. And what I mean by that is, yes, you have to take the complaint, proper intake, proper definition, do the investigation, et cetera. But it can't stop at, quote, the filing cabinet. It can't. And so how do you utilize that? Which means you have to do a couple things. One, you have to make sure that you are truly driving the analytics of complaints. It's not just the processing. What's the data telling you? What do you want to tell you? What can you do with it? How do you action it? And so again, what I always try to drive with data is kind of, I use what I call the 5 A's. My first A is awareness. Do you have visibility to the data? Are you aware of the data? Then you have to do the accessibility. What's it telling you? Do you understand, what's it telling you from a risk categorization? What's it telling you from a utilization, volume, things of this nature? Then that starts translating into truly analytics. What's the analysis? Now you're breaking down from the volume numbers to really what's below the numbers, what's behind the numbers. What is it telling you? Certain trends, certain products, certain uses, certain not uses, et cetera. Then that really drives the most important A's: action, accountability. And that's when you start feeding it back into either your CAPA systems, or you're feeding back into your new product development systems, you're feeding back into your manufacturing improvement systems, et cetera. It needs to be closed loop. Every one of those complaints is a cry to fix something, to prevent something. But if you don't take the mechanisms and connect them, if you don't connect your complaint system to your new product development, if you're not connecting to your CAPA system, then all you're doing is processing paperwork, but to no value, no benefit. Again, we started earlier. Everything you should do starts and ends with the patient. And in this case, complaints is a means of how do you improve that patient's experience? How do you improve the product and the solutions that you're providing? And so it has to be full end-to-end closed loop system. And again, to your point, it's the richest data that we have. It's the gold mine. Just tap into it. Tap into it.
Steve, I think this is a great takeaway for our audience, that 5 A's. And I hope that everyone will take a note of 5 A's and go and start looking at, thinking about that, how they apply 5 A's in their post-market. Just shifting a little bit on the post-market itself, that it makes perfect sense that everyone need to do that. But it's as you know, it's hard to see across the industry. It is just still a compliance-driven initiative. What do you see as a main challenge, main barriers in this? That why everyone is not doing the same thing? That I need to, as you said, apply 5 A's. So what are the challenges in applying 5 A's?
Well, I think I think that the challenges come in 3 levels. We've not broken down the value of a complaint. When you hear complaint, you think negative, and it has an automatic negative connotation. It's everything, and so you will naturally almost run away from it. You still have to meet the requirements, the compliance requirements, but you're not seeing the benefit or the value of it. It's the same thing with CAPAs. It's very common. Companies, CAPA is a 4-letter word. It's almost like a punishment. Rajesh, here's your CAPA, and you feel like I thought you liked me, Steve. Why are you punishing me? And so you're not tapping into the value because you're not creating the value. That's first and foremost. 2, the second big impediment is you're not connecting the systems. What happens is you have this complaint management system way over here, and then new product development way over here, and they don't have the connection. And I would argue every next gen should build not just on the technology from the prior generation, but should solve the prior generation issues. Yeah. With complaints being one of the biggest ones. And so, but we don't necessarily make that connection. We don't sit there and say, okay, how do we take this rich gold mine of data and really distill it down into what are the top issues? What are those things that technology or a process or a product improvement could resolve? And so when you don't have that clarity of the data, you don't have the understanding of the data, and you don't have the connection of the data, then you just keep developing for developing sakes. And so I think you want to do that. The third element of it is we do not give any recognition, hand clap, any kind of things for people who are, quote, preventing complaints. We will make heroics if you process. You don't get a finding, you don't get a late MDR, et cetera. But we don't really incentivize people reducing complaints. We accept complaints as a given, but we don't necessarily challenge ourselves to why it has to be a given. Why can't I reduce a complaint? Why do I have to live with a complaint? And so we have to make sure. So I think those are the 3 elements you'd want to do: is how do you tap into the value? How do you ensure the connection, especially new product development, but across the board, manufacturing, et cetera? And then how do you recognize that somebody preventing or reducing a complaint is just as powerful as somebody, improving yields in manufacturing or reducing cost? It's a means of enhancing the customer experience, and so it should be recognized as such, and it should be rewarded as such.
So Steve, this is such a good conversation, and the topics that we are covering. MedTech is still extremely exciting industry, and the work that all of us do, and you do, and Philips does, and across the board. the work that we are doing for the patients and how we are helping patients across the globe. To that end, my last question to you is, what is your future predictions for the industry? I mean, it is extremely exciting. Where do you see this going next 5 years?
At a much faster pace than it did in the last 3 to 5 years. And I think some of that will be driven by a couple of things. One, technology. Technology is changing so fast. I mean, every day I hear AI, machine learning, AI, machine learning, and it is such a powerful concept and tool and practice, but it's still at the infant stages of what that means and how to best utilize it and how to drive it. So I think technology on its own is going to cause rapid changes and really going to push the barriers and push the barriers in some ways good because you're going to have more access to data, you're going to be able to utilize it faster and more meaningful, but also it could be a little high risk because again, what do you do with the data? How do you understand the data? How do you apply the data? How do you make sure that it doesn't get misused? And so I think technology is going to rapidly change a lot of things. I think expectations, et cetera. We're seeing a lot more because of visibility, because of interactions with patient safety groups and user groups and consumers, et cetera. I think the expectations are only going to go higher in terms of transparency, patient safety, data integrity, all these things that may not have necessarily been the forefront of questions are getting asked constantly because there is not just the benefit, but there's also the risk and the exposure. And so you see a lot more people are asking questions that a lot of companies would have never been asked in the past or never even had to answer. Now you're getting things about, what is your patient safety quality, portfolio? What are you doing to ensure it? How are you driving it? How is it becoming front and center? And it used to be, just the clinical relevancy and effectiveness of the products. No, now you're looking at full, end to end. How does it reduce costs? How does it drive efficiencies? How does it help hospitals reduce workload and because of staffing shortages? So it's only going to become more and more, prevalent and much faster. Like I said, I think everybody says, the last 3 to 5 years were amazingly difficult and fast. I think the next 3 to 5 years are going to be even 10x that.
Steve, that's all time we have, and I appreciate you giving some time to us. I really enjoyed the conversation. A lot of things that we talked about, and I'm sure audience will take some of these topics and implement and use it in their own environments as well. So I really appreciate you taking time for us. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Rajesh. And anytime you need me, I'm here for you. So thank you again.
Thank you.